The encounter that sparked it all. The sun hung high over the bustling city, its rays reflecting off glass skyscrapers and casting long shadows on the busy streets below. Among the ebb and flow of daily life, a single moment was about to disrupt the ordinary. Agent Marcus Lee adjusted his plain hoodie as he exited his unmarked car, blending seamlessly into the throng of people milling about the downtown district. As one of the FBI's top undercover operatives, Marcus knew the weight of the task before him. Months of work had led to this point, an operation aimed at dismantling a notorious human trafficking ring that had eluded law enforcement for years. Today, Marcus was going undercover to finalize the sting. His role was pivotal: pose as a middleman looking to make a deal, infiltrate the organization, and secure the evidence to bring them down. As he walked through the grimy back alley toward the meeting point, he rehearsed the details in his mind, every word and movement calculated. Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, Officer Ryan Daniels patrolled the area. A 10-year veteran of the city's police force, Daniels prided himself on his instincts and sharp eye. But today, his patrol felt off. A vague tip about suspicious activity had put him on edge. With tensions running high across the city due to recent crime waves, Daniels was determined to stay alert. Their paths collided in the most unexpected way. Marcus entered the abandoned warehouse that served as the meeting point. Inside, the air was thick with dust and anticipation. The traffickers, a group of 5 men with hardened expressions, eyed Marcus suspiciously as he approached. He played his part flawlessly, calm, composed, and professional. He handed over a small, carefully prepared dossier, a fake payment intended to seal the deal. Unknown to Marcus, the city's police had received a vague, anonymous call about a suspicious black male at the warehouse. No further details were given, but Daniels happened to be the closest officer to the location. Without waiting for backup, he responded to the call, his adrenaline spiking as he approached. Inside the warehouse, Marcus's earpiece buzzed softly, an alert from his team stationed nearby. "Backup's ready, Carter," a colleague's voice assured him, using his codename. Marcus nodded discreetly, his eyes scanning for any signs of trouble. Then chaos erupted. The sharp sound of a door slamming open echoed through the space. Daniels entered, his gun drawn and voice sharp. "Get on the ground. Now." The traffickers scattered, grabbing their weapons, while Marcus froze, raising his hands. "FBI," he shouted firmly, his voice cutting through the commotion. "I'm Agent Marcus Lee. Drop your weapons." But Daniels wasn't listening. His focus was solely on Marcus, the plainclothes black man standing in what appeared to be a drug deal gone wrong. To Daniels, the scenario was clear: a suspect caught red-handed. "I said, on the ground." Daniels barked, his weapon trained on Marcus. Marcus felt a wave of frustration, but maintained his composure. "Officer, I'm FBI," he said steadily. "Let me show you my badge." "Don't move," Daniels interrupted, stepping closer. His hands trembled slightly on the grip of his firearm. The tension in the room thickened as the traffickers used the distraction to escape through a side exit, leaving only Marcus and Daniels in the standoff. Outside, bystanders began to gather, their smartphones recording the escalating scene. Murmurs spread among the crowd. "Is he really FBI?" someone asked. "Why's the cop so aggressive?" another whispered. Marcus took a deep breath, his mind racing for the safest way to de-escalate. "Officer," he repeated, his tone calm but firm, "I need you to check my badge. It's in my left pocket. I'm reaching slowly. No sudden moves." Daniels shouted, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. The situation spiraled further as Marcus tried to explain, each second feeling like an eternity. The crowd grew louder, some shouting in support of Marcus, others berating Daniels for his actions. Suddenly, another voice cut through the chaos. "Stop. He's FBI." Agent Rodriguez, Marcus's backup, pushed through the crowd, holding up his badge. Daniels hesitated, his grip on the gun loosening as he turned toward Rodriguez. The realization began to dawn on him, but it was too late. The damage was done. The tension broke as Marcus lowered his hand slowly, still maintaining a calm exterior despite the storm raging inside him. Cameras captured every moment, and within hours, the incident would dominate headlines, sparking a nationwide debate that no one could ignore. But for Marcus, this was only the beginning. The fallout begins. The footage of the tense encounter between Agent Marcus Lee and Officer Ryan Daniels spread across the internet like wildfire. Within hours, every major news outlet had picked it up. Social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag Justice for Agent Lee, hashtag Bias in Policing, and hashtag Accountability Now. The video, showing a calm Marcus trying to identify himself as an FBI agent while Daniels held him at gunpoint, became the center of national attention. At the FBI headquarters, Marcus sat in a debriefing room, his hands clasped on the table in front of him. His boss, Deputy Director Anita Harris, stood by the window, her stern expression reflecting the gravity of the situation. The door opened, and Agent Rodriguez stepped in, his face grim. "They've already started spinning it," Rodriguez said, placing his phone on the table. A news clip played, featuring a local commentator defending Daniels' actions. He was responding to a call, the commentator argued. He didn't know the man was an FBI agent. It's a high-stress job, and mistakes happen. Marcus clenched his fists. Mistakes. That word echoed in his mind. A mistake could have cost him his life. Harris turned away from the window, her voice cutting through the tension. "Marcus, you handled yourself professionally. But this incident has become more than just a misunderstanding. It's now a public relations nightmare for both us and the local police department." Marcus looked up, his gaze steady. "What are they doing about Daniels?" Harris sighed. "He's under internal review, but don't expect much. The police union has already come to his defense, framing him as a victim of unfair scrutiny." Marcus shook his head in disbelief. He drew his weapon on a federal agent. This wasn't just an oversight. It was bias. Rodriguez chimed in. "The public's on your side, Marcus. People are calling for accountability. This could be an opportunity to push for change." Harris nodded. "That's why we need to be strategic. The Bureau is fully behind you, but we have to be careful about how we proceed. One wrong move, and this could backfire." Marcus leaned back in his chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had joined the FBI to make a difference, to be a part of something bigger than himself. But now, he was at the center of a storm he never anticipated. A community divided. The city was a cauldron of emotions. Protests erupted outside the police department, with crowds demanding justice for Marcus and an end to systemic bias in law enforcement. Signs reading "Justice for Marcus" and "End Bias in Policing" filled the air as chants echoed down the streets. Inside the precinct, Daniel sat in a small conference room, his head in his hands. His commanding officer, Captain Sarah Monroe, stood across from him, her arms crossed. "Do you understand the gravity of this, Daniels?" Monroe asked, her tone sharp. "You didn't follow protocol. You escalated a situation that should have been de-escalated." Daniels looked up, his face pale. "I thought he was." "You thought?" Monroe interrupted. "That's the problem. You acted on assumptions, and now the entire department is under fire." Daniels slumped in his chair, the weight of his actions sinking in. "What do I do?" Monroe sighed. "For now, stay quiet. The union's handling your defense. But make no mistake, this won't go away easily." Marcus speaks out. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his apartment, scrolling through the flood of messages on his phone. Some were supportive, others hostile. He paused on a text from his sister, Camille. "Camille, I saw the video. Are you okay? This isn't fair. You've worked too hard for this." Marcus called her, meeting a familiar voice. Camille picked up immediately. "Marcus, What are they saying? Are they going to hold him accountable? Camille asked, her voice filled with worry. They're investigating, Marcus replied, his tone weary. But you know how these things go. Camille sighed. You have to speak out. People need to hear your side. Marcus hesitated. He wasn't one for the spotlight, but Camille was right. This wasn't just about him. It was about the broader issue. The next morning, Marcus sat in front of a camera for an exclusive interview with a prominent journalist. The lights were bright, the atmosphere tense. Agent Lee, the journalist began, can you walk us through what happened that day? Marcus recounted the events, his voice calm but firm. I identified myself multiple times. I told him I was FBI, but he didn't listen. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a failure to see me as anything other than a threat. The journalist leaned forward. What do you hope will come of this? Marcus didn't hesitate. Accountability, training, change. This isn't about vilifying one officer. It's about addressing the systemic issues that allow these incidents to happen. Behind the scenes, as Marcus's interview aired, Daniel sat at home, watching in silence. His phone buzzed with messages, some from colleagues offering support, others from friends questioning his actions. A call came through from the police union representative. Daniels, we need to counter this. The media's painting you as the villain. Daniels rubbed his temples. What do you want me to do? Stick to the narrative. You acted in good faith. Say you were following protocol. We'll handle the rest. Daniels nodded, but a knot formed in his stomach. Deep down, he knew he had been wrong. But admitting that publicly, it felt impossible. Uncovering the truth. At the FBI, Harris called Marcus into her office. We've uncovered something, Marcus, she said, handing him a file. The local precinct wasn't supposed to be anywhere near your operation. Someone leaked the details. Marcus's eyes widened. What? Harris nodded grimly. We're investigating, but this changes everything. This wasn't just a mistake, it was sabotage. Marcus clenched his fists. Do we know who? Not yet, Harris said, but we will. The revelation reignited Marcus's determination. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about exposing the corruption that had put his life at risk. As he left Harris's office, his phone buzzed with a message from Rodriguez. Rodriguez, meet me ASAP. New intel. This goes deeper than we thought. Marcus felt a surge of resolve. The fight wasn't over, it was just beginning. The web of deception. Marcus Lee drove through the city in silence, his mind replaying the details of the day's revelations. The realization that someone had deliberately leaked the FBI's operation to the local precinct gnawed at him. This wasn't just a random act of negligence. It was sabotage, and it was personal. He pulled into the underground parking garage of the FBI's field office, his jaw set with determination. Rodriguez was waiting for him near the elevator, his face a mixture of urgency and concern. We need to talk, Rodriguez said, gesturing for Marcus to follow him to a secure conference room. Once inside, Rodriguez locked the door and slid a file across the table. This is what we've got so far. Marcus opened the file and scanned its contents. Names, dates, encrypted messages. Pieces of a puzzle that painted a disturbing picture. At the center of it all was Special Agent Charles Whitman, a senior agent Marcus had once admired. Whitman, Marcus said, disbelief lacing his tone. There has to be a mistake. Rodriguez shook his head. We traced the leaked intel to his computer. And look at this. He pointed to a series of financial transactions highlighted in red. Unexplained deposits. Big ones. All funneled through accounts tied to the cartel we were investigating. Marcus leaned back, his mind racing. Whitman had been a mentor to him, a seasoned agent who had guided him through the challenges of his early career. The idea that Whitman could be involved in something so corrupt was almost unthinkable. What's his connection to the local precinct? Marcus asked. Rodriguez frowned. That's the missing piece. We know someone at the precinct coordinated with him, but we haven't nailed down who. Marcus closed the file, his resolve hardening. We need to confront him. A dangerous confrontation. The next morning, Marcus and Deputy Director Harris sat across from Whitman in a secure interrogation room. Whitman's calm demeanor betrayed no hint of guilt as he folded his hands on the table. "This is unexpected," Whitman said, his tone smooth. "What's this about?" Harris didn't waste time. She placed a printout of the encrypted messages on the table. "We've traced these to your terminal. Whitman, care to explain?" Whitman's expression didn't falter. "I don't recognize these." Marcus leaned forward. "The deposits into your wife's account. Do you not recognize those either?" For the first time, a flicker of unease crossed Whitman's face. "You're accusing me of something serious, Lee. I'd be careful if I were you." "This isn't an accusation," Harris said coldly. "It's an investigation, and the evidence points to you. Someone leaked the details of an FBI operation to local law enforcement, putting Agent Lee's life at risk. That leak came from your terminal." Whitman's eyes narrowed. "You think I'd betray this agency? After everything I've done for it?" Marcus didn't blink. "We think you've been compromised, and we're going to prove it." The tension in the room was palpable. Whitman stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice low and threatening. "I hope you're ready for the fallout." As Whitman walked out, Harris turned to Marcus. "He's lying, but he's careful. We'll need more than this to bring him down." The power of public support. While the FBI continued its investigation, Marcus faced another battle in the court of public opinion. The police union had ramped up its campaign to paint Daniels as a victim, hosting rallies, and pushing their narrative through media outlets. Public support for Marcus was still strong, but the opposition was growing louder. Monica, Marcus's sister, called him one evening with an idea. "We need to counter this," she said. "Let's organize a town hall. Bring the community together. Show them the truth." Marcus hesitated. "You think people will come?" "They already believe in you," Monica said. "They just need a reason to show it." With her help, Marcus and a coalition of community leaders planned the event. Flyers were distributed, social media buzzed with announcements, and the venue quickly reached capacity. On the night of the town hall, Marcus stood on the stage, looking out at the packed auditorium. Cameras lined the back of the room, reporters scribbling notes as the crowd murmured with anticipation. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped to the podium. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "What happened to me wasn't just an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a larger problem, one that affects people across this city, across this country. We need to talk about accountability, about bias, about change." The crowd erupted in applause. One by one, community members shared their stories of discrimination and injustice, their voices raw with emotion. The room crackled with energy, a collective determination to demand better. An unexpected ally. As the event wound down, Marcus was approached by someone he didn't expect to see. Officer Ryan Daniels. The crowd parted as Daniels walked toward the stage, his uniform crisp but his expression uncertain. The room fell silent. "Agent Lee," Daniels began, his voice shaky. "I need to say something." Marcus crossed his arms, waiting. "I was wrong," Daniels said, his words tumbling out. "I let my biases dictate my actions. I endangered you, and I'm sorry." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some clapped hesitantly. Others looked skeptical. Marcus studied Daniels, searching for sincerity in his eyes. "This isn't about an apology," Marcus said finally. "It's about accountability. What are you willing to do to make this right?" Daniels straightened. "Whatever it takes." The moment hung in the air, charged with possibility. Marcus extended a hand, and after a brief pause, Daniels shook it. The deeper conspiracy. As the town hall made headlines, Marcus returned to the investigation. Rodriguez had uncovered a new lead, a series of communications linking Whitman, to a high-ranking officer at the precinct, Captain Monroe. "They've been working together for years," Rodriguez explained, "and it looks like they've been using the cartel as a cover for something bigger, money laundering." Marcus's stomach turned. "And the operation I was on. They wanted it to fail," Rodriguez said. "You were getting too close to exposing them." The pieces fell into place. Whitman and Monroe weren't just protecting the cartel. They were part of it. "We need to move fast," Marcus said, "before they cover their tracks." The stage was set for the next chapter in Marcus's fight, not just for justice, but for the truth. The deeper he dug, the more dangerous the conspiracy became, and he knew the road ahead would test him like never before. Into the shadows, the dim glow of a computer screen illuminated Agent Marcus Lee's face as he pored over the latest evidence late into the night. The pieces were coming together. Encrypted emails, financial records, and surveillance footage all pointed to an intricate web of corruption involving Special Agent Charles Whitman and Captain Sarah Monroe of the local police precinct. But the deeper Marcus dug, the more he realized that this conspiracy wasn't just about covering for the cartel. It was about something far more sinister. The cartel was a smokescreen, a front for a far-reaching network that extended into legitimate businesses, political offices, and even the justice system. Rodriguez knocked softly on Marcus's office door, breaking his concentration. "We've got a break," Rodriguez said, stepping inside. He placed a USB drive on Marcus's desk. Anonymous tip. Someone on the inside might be trying to help. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What's on it?" Rodriguez shrugged. "Not sure yet. It verified it's clean. No malware. Thought you'd want to take the first look." Marcus plugged the drive into his laptop, his heart racing. A folder appeared on the screen, labeled simply, "The Phoenix Project." The Phoenix Project. Inside the folder were dozens of documents, each more alarming than the last. Marcus scanned through files detailing a covert operation codenamed The Phoenix Project, allegedly orchestrated by a shadowy organization embedded within law enforcement and intelligence agencies. The goal? To manipulate investigations, protect criminal enterprises, and consolidate power. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he opened a document labeled Targeted Agents. His breath caught in his throat as he saw his own name at the top of the list. The document described him as a threat to operational stability and recommended neutralization by any means necessary. "They've been watching me," Marcus muttered, his voice low. Rodriguez leaned over his shoulder, his face pale as he read. "This isn't just about the cartel. This is a full-blown shadow network." Marcus nodded, his jaw tightening. "And Whitman is their inside man. A risky proposition." The next morning, Marcus and Deputy Director Anita Harris convened with a small, trusted team in a secure briefing room. The walls were lined with soundproofing, and everyone present had been carefully vetted. Harris addressed the room, her tone grave. "We have enough evidence to confront Whitman and Monroe directly, but we don't know how deep this goes. If we act too soon, we risk tipping them off and losing everything." Marcus leaned forward. "What about flipping one of them? Monroe might break under pressure." Harris shook her head. "Monroe's too entrenched. She has as much to lose as Whitman. Our best bet is Whitman. He's not as bold as he pretends to be, but he's careful. We'll need leverage." Rodriguez chimed in. "We have something. Financial records show Whitman funneled money into a shell company tied to his family. If we threaten to expose his wife's involvement, he might cooperate." Marcus frowned. "I don't like dragging families into this." "It's not ideal," Harris admitted. "But we're out of options. The Phoenix Project isn't just a threat to you. It's a threat to national security." Reluctantly, Marcus agreed. The plan was set. They would confront Whitman and give him one chance to come clean. The confrontation. That evening, Marcus and Harris intercepted Whitman as he left the bureau. He hesitated when he saw them waiting by his car, but his mask of calm remained intact. "Agent Whitman," Harris said, her tone formal. "We need to talk." Whitman glanced around, clearly weighing his options. "What's this about?" Marcus stepped closer, his voice firm. "We know about the shell company. We know about the money. And we know about the Phoenix Project." For the first time, Whitman's composure faltered. His jaw tightened, and his eyes darted to the side, as if searching for an escape. "Let's not do this here," Harris said, gesturing toward a nearby black SUV. "Get in. Now." Whitman hesitated but eventually climbed into the vehicle. Inside, Harris wasted no time. She laid out the evidence against him, her words sharp and deliberate. "You're looking at multiple charges, Whitman," Harris said. "Conspiracy, obstruction, aiding, and abetting criminal enterprises. The list goes on." Whitman's face was pale, but he tried to maintain his defiance. "You don't have anything concrete." Marcus smirked. "We have enough to bury you, but we're giving you a way out. Cooperate, and we'll make sure your family stays out of this." Whitman's facade cracked. "You're bluffing." Harris leaned forward. "Try us." After a long pause, Whitman sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "What do you want?" "The truth," Marcus said. "All of it." A shocking revelation. Over the next few hours, Whitman spilled everything he knew. The Phoenix Project was more than just a rogue operation. It was a calculated effort to undermine law enforcement and judicial systems from within. High-ranking officials, business leaders, and even politicians were implicated. But one revelation stood out above the rest. They wanted Lee gone because he was getting too close. Whitman admitted, his voice shaky. "The operation you were on, they set it up to fail." The call to the precinct came directly from Monroe. Marcus's stomach churned. "They wanted me dead." Whitman nodded. "You were a threat. They knew you wouldn't stop digging." A plan to expose the network. With Whitman's testimony and the documents from the USB drive, Marcus and Harris knew they had enough to dismantle the network. But it wouldn't be easy. The Phoenix Project's influence was vast, and exposing it would require careful coordination. "We can't do this alone," Harris said. "We'll need help from the Attorney General's office and federal oversight agencies." Marcus nodded. "And we need to move fast. If Monroe gets wind of this, she'll destroy evidence, or worse." The team worked through the night, preparing warrants and planning coordinated raids on key locations tied to the Phoenix Project. Marcus felt a mix of determination and unease. The stakes had never been higher, but he knew they were on the brink of something monumental. As the sun rose, casting its first light over the city, Marcus stood with his team, ready to bring down the shadow network that had nearly cost him everything. The storm breaks. The clock read 4:00 a.m. as Marcus Lee stood in the FBI's operations center, the room buzzing with quiet intensity. Maps of the city were projected on the walls, marked with red and blue indicators showing key locations tied to the Phoenix Project. Marcus's focus was unwavering as he reviewed the final plans for the raid. They had one shot at dismantling this shadow network, and failure wasn't an option. Deputy Director Anita Harris stood at the front of the room, her commanding voice cutting through the tension. "This operation requires precision. We're targeting multiple sites simultaneously: Monroe's precinct, Whitman's safe house, and a downtown office believed to be the nerve center of the Phoenix Project." Agents nodded, their faces a mixture of determination and exhaustion. Months of work had led to this moment. Marcus stepped forward, addressing the team. "Remember, these people are dangerous. They've already shown they're willing to put lives at risk to protect their network. Stay sharp and stick to protocol. We bring them in alive if possible, but don't take unnecessary chances." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed his words. Then, with a nod from Harris, the agents dispersed to their assignments. The raid begins. Marcus rode with Rodriguez in an unmarked van, their destination the downtown office building suspected of housing the network's central operations. The building was nondescript, blending seamlessly into the cityscape, but intelligence suggested it held encrypted servers and crucial documents. As the van approached, Marcus adjusted his tactical gear and checked his weapon. "We go in fast, secure the servers, and detain anyone on site," he said, his tone steady. Rodriguez grinned nervously. "You make it sound easy." The van screeched to a halt, and the team moved into position. The lead agent signaled, and the door was breached with a thunderous explosion of force. Marcus was the first through, his weapon raised as he swept the room. Inside, chaos erupted. Men and women in suits scrambled to destroy files, smash hard drives, and flee. Marcus barked commands, his voice cutting through the noise. "FBI. Hands up. Don't move." One man made a break for the exit, clutching a laptop. Marcus sprinted after him, tackling him to the ground. The laptop skidded across the floor as Marcus secured the suspect with zip ties. "Nice try," Marcus muttered, hauling the man to his feet. Across the room, Rodriguez and another agent worked quickly to secure the servers. "We've got it," Rodriguez called out. "The encryption's tough, but it's all here." The precinct standoff. Meanwhile, at Monroe's precinct, a team of agents faced resistance. Captain Monroe had barricaded herself in her office, surrounded by loyal officers. Through a megaphone, the lead agent called out, "Captain Monroe, this is the FBI. Open the door and surrender peacefully." Inside, Monroe paced, her mind racing. She had underestimated how quickly the FBI would act. She glanced at her desk, where a loaded gun sat next to a shredder overflowing with half-destroyed documents. "This isn't over," she muttered to herself. Outside, the FBI team prepared to breach. Explosives shattered the door, and agents poured in, their weapons trained on Monroe. She raised her hand slowly, her face a mask of defiance. "You think you've won," she sneered. "You have no idea how deep this goes." One of the agents stepped forward, securing her in handcuffs. "We'll see about that." A race against time. Back at the downtown office, Marcus and Rodriguez were uploading the seized data to the FBI's secure servers. The files were vast, containing everything from financial transactions to encrypted communications. But one file stood out, a real-time alert indicating a failsafe. "What is this?" Marcus asked, pointing to the screen. Rodriguez's face paled. "It's a remote trigger. They've set up a data wipe at another location. If they activate it, we lose everything." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Where's the trigger?" Rodriguez typed furiously, tracing the signal. "Warehouse District. Less than 10 minutes from here." Marcus grabbed his gear. "Call it in. We're going now." The final showdown. The warehouse was dark and eerily quiet as Marcus and a small team approached. Intelligence suggested the fail-safe was controlled by a single operative. Marcus signaled his team to fan out and move cautiously. Inside, the glow of a single monitor illuminated the room. A lone figure sat at the desk, typing furiously. Marcus crept closer, his weapon aimed steadily. "Hands where I can see them," Marcus ordered, his voice firm. The figure froze, then turned slowly. It was a young woman, no older than 25. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, poised to hit a final command. "Don't do it," Marcus warned. "Step away from the computer." The woman's eyes darted to the screen, then back to Marcus. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "If I don't wipe this, they'll come after me." Marcus softened his tone, stepping closer. "They're already finished. We've dismantled the network. You don't have to protect them." Tears welled in her eyes. "You're wrong. This is bigger than you think." Before Marcus could respond, the sound of tires screeching outside sent a chill down his spine. Backup for the operative had arrived. An ambush. A black SUV barreled into the warehouse, and armed men poured out, guns blazing. Marcus dove for cover, returning fire as his team engaged. "Rodriguez, get that trigger secured," Marcus shouted. Rodriguez sprinted toward the desk, dodging bullets as he reached the computer. The young woman hesitated, then ducked under the desk, terrified by the chaos. Marcus's training took over as he moved methodically, neutralizing one attacker after another. The firefight was intense, the air thick with smoke and the sound of gunfire. Finally, the last attacker fell. Marcus looked around, his breath heavy as the dust settled. "Status," he called out. Rodriguez emerged from behind the desk, holding a USB drive triumphantly. "Fail-safe neutralized. We've got everything." The aftermath. Hours later, Marcus sat in the FBI's operations center, surrounded by his team. The data retrieved from the raids was staggering. Names, dates, locations, the entire framework of the Phoenix Project was exposed. Harris entered the room, her expression a mix of exhaustion and triumph. "It's over," she said. "We've issued warrants for dozens of arrests. This network is finished." Marcus nodded, a sense of relief washing over him. But deep down, he knew this victory was just one step in a larger battle. Corruption like this didn't vanish overnight. As the team celebrated quietly, Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from Monica. "Monica, proud of you. You did it." Marcus smiled faintly, replying quickly. "Marcus, we did it, but there's still more to do." He put the phone down and leaned back, the weight of the day pressing on him. For now, the storm had passed. But tomorrow, the fight for justice would continue. The fight intensifies. As Marcus leaned against the warehouse wall, catching his breath, the adrenaline of the firefight still coursing through his veins, his earpiece crackled to life. Harris's voice came through, urgent and commanding. "Lee, status update. Did you secure the failsafe?" Marcus glanced at Rodriguez, who was securing the operative in handcuffs. The USB drive containing the decryption for the fail-safe dangled from his partner's fingers like a trophy. "Fail-safe neutralized," Marcus confirmed. "We've got the operative and the data. But it wasn't clean. They sent backup." "How bad?" Harris asked. 4 hostiles, all neutralized," Marcus replied. "No casualties on our end." "Good work," Harris said. "Bring the operative and the data in immediately. We've got another problem brewing." The operative speaks. On the way back to the field office, Marcus sat across from the young operative, her face pale and streaked with tears. Her name, according to her ID, was Clara Jacobs. She had the look of someone in over her head, her trembling hands betraying her fear. "Why don't you start talking, Clara?" Marcus said, his tone firm but not unkind. "Who's pulling the strings?" She shook her head, her eyes darting to Rodriguez, who sat beside Marcus. "You don't get it. They'll find me, no matter what I say." "Who's they?" Marcus pressed. "The Phoenix Project. Whitman, Monroe." Clara's silence stretched on until Rodriguez leaned in. "Listen, you've got one shot to cooperate. You've seen what we can do. If you help us, we can protect you." Finally, Clara sighed, her shoulders slumping. "It's bigger than you think. The Phoenix Project is just the tip of the iceberg. They're everywhere, in agencies, corporations, even the government. They have contingencies for everything. And they don't forgive loose ends." Marcus exchanged a glance with Rodriguez. Clara's words confirmed their worst fears. The Phoenix Project wasn't just a rogue operation. It was a coordinated effort with deep roots. "Names," Marcus said. "Give us names." Clara hesitated, then whispered, "You won't believe me, but it goes up to Senator Wycliffe. He's the one funding the whole thing." Marcus's blood ran cold. Senator Richard Wycliffe was a high-profile figure, often championing law enforcement reforms. If he was involved, the scope of the conspiracy was unprecedented. A new target. Back at the field office, Marcus, Harris, and Rodriguez convened in a secure conference room. The data from the USB drive and Clara's testimony painted a chilling picture. The Phoenix Project wasn't just manipulating law enforcement. It was infiltrating the highest levels of power. "Wycliffe," Harris muttered, pacing the room. "This changes everything. If we go after him, We'll need airtight evidence. Rodriguez pointed to the monitor displaying decrypted files. We've got financial transfers, encrypted communications, and Clara's testimony. It's a start. Marcus nodded. It's not enough to bring him down, but it's enough to make him sweat. If we lean on Whitman and Monroe, they might flip on him. Harris stopped pacing, her expression resolute. Then we do it. We bring them in for formal interrogation. The interrogation. Whitman sat in the sterile interrogation room, his hands cuffed to the table. He looked disheveled, his usual confidence replaced with visible anxiety. Marcus and Harris entered, their presence commanding. Agent Whitman, Harris began, we've connected you to the Phoenix Project, the cartel, and now Senator Wycliffe. You have two choices: cooperate and give us everything, or spend the rest of your life in a cell. Whitman scoffed, though his voice lacked conviction. Wycliffe, you think I'm going to implicate a senator? You're dreaming. Marcus leaned in, his voice low and menacing. Dreaming? We have your encrypted emails, your financial transactions, and a witness who saw you coordinating with Monroe. You're done, Whitman. The only question is whether you want to go down alone. Whitman's facade cracked. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead as he shifted uncomfortably. If I talk, I'm a dead man. Not if we protect you, Harris countered. But that offer won't last forever. Whitman's resolve wavered. After a long pause, he exhaled sharply. Fine. I'll talk, but you'll need more than me to take down Wycliffe. The sting. Using Whitman's information, the FBI set up a sting operation targeting Senator Wycliffe. Whitman agreed to wear a wire during a meeting with the senator, where they would discuss funding for the Phoenix Project. The goal was to catch Wycliffe incriminating himself. Marcus and Rodriguez monitored the operation from a nearby surveillance van, their eyes glued to the live feed from Whitman's wire. Here we go, Rodriguez muttered as Wycliffe entered the room, his demeanor calm and authoritative. Charles, Wycliffe said, shaking Whitman's hand, I trust everything is in order. Whitman hesitated, then replied, not exactly. The FBI's closing in. They've got files, witnesses. I need more resources to clean this up. Wycliffe frowned. That's not what I want to hear. We've invested too much to let this unravel. Do whatever it takes. No loose ends. The words were damning, and Marcus nodded to the team. We've got him. The arrest. Moments later, FBI agents stormed the meeting, taking Wycliffe into custody. His shock quickly turned to anger as he realized what had happened. You'll regret this, Wycliffe spat at Marcus as he was led away in handcuffs. Marcus met his gaze, unflinching. Maybe. But not as much as you will. A fragile victory. As the dust settled, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The Phoenix Project was dismantled, but the scars it left behind were deep. Lives had been endangered, trust had been shattered, and Marcus knew the fight against corruption was far from over. In a press conference the next day, Harris commended Marcus and the team for their bravery and dedication. The public response was overwhelming, with renewed calls for accountability and reform. That night, as Marcus sat in his apartment, his phone buzzed with a message from Monica. Monica, you're a hero, Marcus. Proud doesn't even begin to cover it. Marcus smiled faintly, replying, Thanks, sis, just doing my job. He put the phone down, knowing that while this chapter had closed, the fight for justice was never ending. The cost of justice. The media frenzy following Senator Wycliffe's arrest was unparalleled. For days, his face dominated every news channel, and the details of the Phoenix Project unraveled like a shocking political thriller. Public outrage surged as the nation came to terms with how deeply corruption had infiltrated their institutions. But for Marcus Lee, the victory was bittersweet. The dismantling of the Phoenix Project had come at a cost. Lives endangered, trust betrayed, and scars that would take a lifetime to heal. A nation reacts. In the weeks following the arrest, protests erupted across the country. Crowds demanded systemic reform in law enforcement, government accountability, and transparency in intelligence operations. The public's anger was palpable, but so was their hope. Marcus watched the coverage from his desk at the FBI field office, exhaustion etched into his features. His phone buzzed with a notification. Another article highlighting his role in exposing the conspiracy. Agent Lee, the man who took down corruption, the headline read. He sighed, placing the phone face down on his desk. It wasn't about him. It had never been about him. But the spotlight refused to fade. Rodriguez walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. Figured you could use this, he said, handing one to Marcus. Thanks, Marcus muttered, taking the sip. How's the fallout? Rodriguez shrugged. A mixed bag. Public support is huge, but the Bureau's catching heat for letting this go on so long. And the media's loving every second of it. Marcus nodded. It was never going to be clean. Nope, Rodriguez agreed, sitting across from him. But we did the right thing. That counts for something. Unexpected consequences. While Marcus and his team had dismantled the Phoenix Project, its remnants lingered. Investigations into peripheral figures revealed a network of enablers, bankers, lawyers, and politicians who had facilitated the conspiracy. One name stood out, James Tolland, a high-ranking official in the Department of Justice. Evidence suggested he had not only turned a blind eye to the Phoenix Project, but actively protected its operatives. His involvement sent shockwaves through the legal system. Deputy Director Harris called Marcus and Rodriguez into her office. Tolland's trying to cut a deal, she said, her tone heavy. He's willing to give us more names, but he wants immunity. Marcus scoffed. Immunity. After everything he's done. Harris nodded grimly. It's not ideal, but his testimony could expose an entirely new layer of corruption. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. How do we know he's not just saving himself? We don't, Harris admitted. But we can't ignore the possibility that he's telling the truth. Marcus frowned. If we give him immunity, it sets a dangerous precedent. Harris sighed. I know. That's why I'm asking you. Should we take the deal? The ethical dilemma. Marcus spent the next 24 hours wrestling with the decision. Tolland's testimony could blow the lid off corruption at the highest levels, but granting him immunity felt like a betrayal of the principles Marcus had fought to uphold. He called Monica for advice, her insight often grounding him in moments of doubt. Do you trust him? Monica asked after he explained the situation. No, Marcus admitted, but this isn't about trust, it's about strategy. Then ask yourself this, Monica said. Will taking the deal bring more justice than rejecting it? Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel right. Her words stayed with him as he met with Harris the next morning. Take the deal, Marcus said firmly, but make it conditional. He gives us everything, or we revoke the immunity. Harris nodded. Agreed. Let's see how far this rabbit hole goes. The trial of a lifetime. Months later, Senator Wycliffe stood trial, his once polished image tarnished beyond repair. Tolland's testimony, along with a mountain of evidence collected during the raids, painted a damning picture of corruption, greed, and betrayal. Marcus was called to testify as well. Sitting in the courtroom, he recounted the operation that had nearly cost him his life, the layers of deception he'd uncovered, and the dangerous path to justice. His calm, measured tone captivated the jury and the public alike. In the end, Wycliffe was convicted on multiple charges, including conspiracy, obstruction, and corruption. He received a sentence of 25 years in federal prison. The verdict was hailed as a victory for accountability, but Marcus couldn't ignore the lingering bitterness. The system had worked this time, but how many other conspiracies remained hidden in the shadows? A personal reckoning. With the trial behind him, Marcus returned to his routine at the Bureau, though he couldn't shake the weight of what he'd uncovered. Late one night, he found himself sitting alone in his apartment, a glass of bourbon in hand. His thoughts drifted to Whitman, Monroe, and even Daniels, all people whose choices had led to ruin. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. Opening it, he found Monica standing there, holding a takeout bag. "Thought you could use some company," she said, stepping inside. They ate in comfortable silence for a while before Monica spoke. "You've been quiet since the trial. What's on your mind?" Marcus sighed. "Everything. It's like, no matter how much we expose, there's always more. Another layer, another fight." Monica placed a hand on his shoulder. "You can't fix everything, Marcus, but you made a difference. That matters." He nodded, her words a small balm for his weary soul. Looking ahead. The next day, Marcus walked into the FBI field office, his determination renewed. Harris greeted him with a stack of files. "New cases?" Marcus asked. She nodded. "And new recruits. People want to join because of what you did." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What I did?" "You showed them what integrity looks like," Harris said with a small smile. "Don't underestimate the power of that." Marcus took the files, his resolve strengthening. The fight against corruption was far from over, but he was ready. This was his purpose, his calling. As he sat at his desk, preparing to dive into the next challenge, his phone buzzed with a notification. "Monica, don't work too hard. Proud of you." Marcus smiled. The journey had been grueling, but it was worth it. One case at a time, one truth at a time, he would keep fighting, for justice, for accountability, and for the people who needed it most. Epilogue. The Ripple Effect. Months later, a young law student sat in a lecture, inspired by the story of Agent Marcus Lee. She had followed his case closely, and his unwavering dedication to justice had lit a fire in her. That day, she decided to apply for a position with the FBI. Marcus's actions had created a ripple effect, inspiring a new generation to stand up against corruption and fight for a better future. And though he might never know the full impact of his work, his legacy would endure, proof that one person, with courage and conviction, could change the world.